You don't notice the moment it happens, but there comes a day when everything you're chasing feels cheap, and the things that used to scare you suddenly lose their power. You've probably felt it in small flashes, like when you're scrolling through your phone and suddenly realize you're not even enjoying anything, yet you keep going because stopping feels uncomfortable. Or when you're trying to impress someone who isn't even paying attention, but you still adjust yourself, your words, your reactions, as if their opinion is the oxygen you breathe. You catch yourself doing it, and you feel a quiet embarrassment, the kind you don't admit to anyone. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just that sinking awareness that you're moving through life almost automatically, pulled by things that don't actually matter, and without noticing it, you build your day around these tiny pulls. The pull to be approved, the pull to be seen, the pull to be relevant, the pull to not fall behind. You think you're making choices, but most of the time you're responding to invisible pressures that have been there so long you mistake them for personality. You've been trained to believe that everything has weight, that every opinion about you matters, that every slip, every mistake, every awkward moment leaves a scar that everyone remembers. And because of that, you carry a constant fear of becoming insignificant. You don't call it fear, you call it being responsible or being normal. But underneath, it's the same thing. The worry that without these attachments, you'd be nothing. This is where the loop begins. You chase things hoping they'll make you feel solid. You cling to roles, expectations, possessions, routines, people, achievements, even small compliments, because each one offers a brief sense of self. And when you lose one of them, you feel yourself collapse a little. This is the loop most people live in without noticing, and it keeps them enslaved to vanity. Not vanity in the sense of beauty or ego, but vanity in the sense of emptiness, the desperate attempt to fill a hole that can't be filled. The truth you don't want to look at is simple. The moment you stop believing these attachments define you, they stop controlling you. This realization is uncomfortable because it feels like inviting chaos, but it's actually the beginning of freedom. And you've tasted that freedom before, even if only for a second. Think about the rare moment when you stopped caring what someone thought, or the moment you let go of an expectation and felt relief instead of fear. That feeling wasn't apathy, it was clarity. And clarity is the first sign that your mind is waking up to the fact that everything you cling to is at its core, vanity. And when you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore. That line will make more sense as we go deeper, so let it sit in the back of your mind for now. You don't notice the moment it happens, but there comes a day when everything you're chasing feels cheap, and the things that used to scare you suddenly lose their power. The strange part is that this realization doesn't usually happen in big life events. It shows up in boring moments, like being in a room full of people and suddenly noticing how everyone is performing in small ways, laughing slightly louder than necessary, pretending to listen, mirroring facial expressions. And you catch yourself doing it too. Or when you're standing in front of your closet, trying to pick something to wear, and you're not thinking about comfort or even preference. You're imagining how people will see you. You're trying to predict reactions. You're rehearsing judgments that haven't even happened yet. And the more you observe these moments, the more you see the pattern. You live in a constant evaluation, not because others actually care, but because your mind learned to survive by anticipating approval. And this is where vanity becomes invisible. Vanity is not pride, it's dependence. It's needing the world to hold a mirror up to you so you can know who you are. And that need keeps you trapped. The trap is simple. As long as something outside you defines you, anything outside you can break you. That's why losing a job feels like losing identity. That's why being ignored feels like being erased. That's why failing at something you weren't even passionate about feels like humiliation. Not because the event matters, but because your mind tied its worth to it. There's a character I'll call Aldrich, someone with a quiet, unremarkable presence. The kind of person you don't notice until he stops being who he's expected to be. Aldrich spent years shaping himself around other people's expectations. He wasn't loud, he wasn't bold, but he was constantly adjusting. A different version of himself for every room. And he never realized how exhausting it was until one day he stopped trying. Not because of a big awakening, but because he hit a level of emotional tiredness he couldn't push through anymore. When he no longer had the energy to perform, something strange happened. The world didn't collapse. People didn't leave. In fact, nobody even noticed the shift. And that's when the truth hit him with a quiet harshness. He had built his entire personality around fears that existed only in his mind. This is how most people live. And this is why the line keeps returning. When you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore. The more you observe your own behavior, the more you see that almost everything that stresses you, scares you, and pressures you has no real depth. It's a story that survives only because you keep feeding it. The real tension begins when you start noticing how much of your life is not actually your life. Think about the choices you make because you don't want to disappoint someone. Think about the hobbies you force yourself to like because they sound respectable. Think about the ways you talk, the phrases you use, the tones you switch into depending on who you're around. Think about how often you say yes when you want to say no, but you're afraid that refusing would make you less likable. Think about how many decisions you make not because they're right for you, but because they help you avoid discomfort. Then think about the anxiety that comes from trying to maintain all these versions of yourself. People often assume their stress comes from work or relationships or responsibilities, but most of the time it comes from trying to keep the identity you've built from falling apart. And the mind hates this pressure, but it's also addicted to it. Because the pressure gives you a sense of existence. It makes you feel like you matter, even if the feeling is stressful. This is where the hidden loop sits. You cling to things because you think they give your life meaning, but the meaning is temporary, fragile, and dependent on forces you cannot control. And the moment something threatens it, you panic. Not because the thing itself matters, but because losing it threatens the story you built about who you are. This is why people fear rejection more than loneliness. Why people chase validation they don't even respect. Why people try to impress people they don't like. Because vanity, psychological vanity, is not about showing off. It's about desperately trying to stabilize a shaky identity. And the identity stays shaky because it never came from you in the first place. You built it from habits, fears, comparisons, and expectations. You built it from survival instincts, not self-awareness. So when you start questioning it, everything feels like it's falling apart. But it's not falling apart, it's falling off. And when you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore. That sentence becomes heavier the more you recognize how little of your behavior comes from genuine choice. And this recognition is not comfortable. It's slow, unsettling, and sometimes painful, because you start seeing your entire personality through a new lens, and the lens reveals how much of it was constructed to avoid the fear of being nothing. The breakthrough doesn't arrive in a grand moment. It begins quietly. First you notice the pattern, then you see it again, then again. And the repetition starts weakening the illusion. You begin to sense that your mind is operating from old wiring. You start catching yourself mid-performance. You say something to impress someone and immediately feel the emptiness behind it. You dress for approval and feel a small discomfort the moment you realize why you chose that outfit. You post something online and feel the strange anxiety of waiting for reactions before noticing how absurd that dependency is. You realize that none of these things actually define you. They are habits, they are reflexes, they are survival strategies that no longer serve a purpose. Awareness breaks the cycle slowly, not by force, not by motivation, but by observation. The more you see the pattern, the weaker it becomes. And then the realization hits you in small waves. Everything you cling to for validation is vanity. And when you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore. This realization doesn't make you emotionless. It doesn't make you detached or cold. It simply takes the teeth out of fear. It removes the imaginary authority the world has over you. You begin to understand that people are too busy with their own performances to judge yours. You understand that mistakes don't define you because nobody is keeping score. You understand that approval is unstable and can't hold your identity together. Slowly, the fear of being nothing transforms into a calm acceptance. And in that acceptance, you find something strange and unexpected. Strength. The strength to choose without fear. The strength to be disliked. The strength to fail without collapsing. The strength to walk away from roles that never fit you. The strength to stop performing and simply exist. Not as a character, not as a projection, but as a person who no longer needs the world to hand them a sense of self. The final stage is subtle. You don't become free all at once. You become free in small pieces. You stop chasing reactions. You stop fearing silence. You stop trying to control how others see you, and gradually, life becomes quieter. Not empty, quiet. You begin to see that the things you once feared losing were never truly yours. They were attachments your mind picked up along the way. And once those attachments lose their power, you start experiencing life without the constant background pressure of performance. When you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore. And when nothing enslaves you, you don't become careless, you become real. You start choosing actions because they matter to you, not because they make you look a certain way. You start speaking honestly because you no longer fear the cost of truth. You start making decisions without rehearsing imaginary judgments. You start living from the inside out instead of outside in. And the change is not dramatic. It's steady, it's grounded, it's a quiet shift in the way you relate to yourself. The psychological action you can take right now is simple. The next time you feel yourself performing, stop, notice it. Observe the urge to impress or adjust or protect an image. Don't fight it, just watch it. Awareness is the beginning of freedom, and sometimes the first real moment of freedom is recognizing how long you've been controlled by things that never mattered. When you realize everything is vanity, nothing enslaves you anymore.